Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Ross. I'm Principal at Economist Impact, and I hope you've enjoyed this morning just as much as I have. It's been fascinating, and Vijay's been working very hard for us all, and I'm going to try and work just as hard as well, along with Sumit Gupta from BCG, who's joined me on stage today. Sumit is the Managing Director and Senior Partner, Asia Pacific Leader, Climate and Sustainability Practice for BCG. First up, big thank you to you and to BCG for supporting not just this event, but all of the sustainability events that we're doing around the world in this 10th year of Sustainability Week. So really good to sort of have you on board.
Thank you so much, Charles, and the Economist team for doing this consistently year after year. So, and of course, great to be here in middle of this passionate crowd, which is here for a reason, for a purpose, and for making things to happen.
Indeed. And we're going to test their passion a little bit later when I try and go for some questions sort of towards the end of this panel discussion, which we are today talking about decarbonisation. Great topic, and I do wonder, and we're sort of going to get to this on our panel discussion today, that I don't envy business leaders at the moment because there's a lot of things on their to-do list or their focus list, whether it's things dealing with geopolitical challenges, which might be impacting supply chains or trade, dealing with the economic situation, with sort of pressure on revenues and profitability, dealing with AI to try and understand how we can implement that into our business to remain competitive, and then of course decarbonisation. Now I want to ask you that first question. And sort of, I've listed all of those things. I just wonder, from your perspective, where is decarbonisation sort of sitting within that list from a priority sort of perspective? Is it being pushed further down the list given everything else that is going on at the moment?
No, so I think it's really very dynamic and challenging times overall. I think geopolitically, we had a session earlier today where we spoke about all of this. So I think we'll not repeat a lot of stuff from there. But I do believe that I think there are companies, there are industries which do continue to focus on decarbonization, and there is a reason for doing that. It continues to stay a top priority. Of course, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 differs from industry by industry. But if you actually look at fundamentally why people want to do it, I think one, early decarbonization leads to a lot of cost advantages. Second, it gives you access to markets. So with the regulations like EU CBAM coming into effect, especially for Asia as a region, we do export a lot of stuff. Whether it's China, India, Korea, the entire Southeast Asia bucket as well. So there is, a lot of billions of dollars at stake, as CBAM comes into effect and the compliance norms, further tighten. Even in the Asia Pacific region itself, if you look at countries, they are increasingly coming up with different types of regulations, regulation of carbon markets, whether it's regulation and policies in terms of, decarbonization targets. Thirdly, ours is a growing region. We are not talking about, world GDP numbers. If you take any of the countries, of course, there's a wide disparity across the region, but everyone is focused on growth. And as you think about growth, especially on the heavy emitter side, the absolute emissions go up. So there is no other choice but to actually improve, your emissions per ton or emissions per kg. And that's the only way to go ahead if we as a region have to meet our target of across countries of 2050, 2060, 2070 net zero as well. So I do see decarbonization continue to sustain as one of the key points in boardroom discussions when I work with the private sector. I do see it as one of the key focus areas for governments across, as we work on the public sector side as well. So it does sustain. Maybe it's lost a little bit of sheen, but I think it's become more practical in nature.
Yeah.
And now, rather than people talking about it, they're trying to act on it and actually deliver on the promises being made.
So the practical piece, I guess that comes back. If we got better at building the business cases for decarbonisation, you mentioned earlier the early stages of it are areas where I guess they're easier to address, and can we be profitable in the early stages of decarbonisation? And how does that sort of develop as it gets harder and harder? At what point does it become a cost? around that. Talk us through those sort of different phases of decarbonisation that you're seeing.
No, absolutely. And I think that answer varies by industry, of course.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, as we have done work across major industries, we do see the 30, 30, 40 kind of a stack chart as we think about abatement curves. The first 30% is more related to, efficiency, is more related to using of renewable energy, is about getting efficiency and productivity improvement in operations, which is typically hugely remunerative. It leads to carbon reduction, but it also leads to cost reduction. So it's like a win-win on both sides. The next 30 is where we see, depending on the industry, is typically cost neutral. Of course, requires upfront investment on capex, so you need to have some financing solutions in place. But in general, if you look over a period of 5, 7, 10 years, those investments actually yield, equivalent benefits. So it's kind of a net neutral solution, leading to carbon benefit, so carbon reduction happening, but may not lead to, a lot of cost upswing or downswing.
I guess maybe that's this phase where we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown at the moment in sort of.
Yeah, that's the one where,
Okay.
upfront investments become the thing. The last 40%
Yep.
is where basically the technology starts coming into play.
Yep.
So frankly, a lot of industries, they've put in their net zero roadmaps, but the last 30, 40% is yet to be explored. There's always a bucket that future technologies will evolve and, we will solve for it. So that's where now investments have gotten over the last 2, 3 years. We are seeing some practical pilots come up, whether it's in the CCU space or, hydrogen space, etc. And I hope as the next 3, 4 years evolve, those become realistic solutions and start shifting. This trend of 30, 30, 40 becomes maybe 30, 40, 30, 30, 50, 20, and over a period of time, you maybe get to a 50-50 equivalent split as well. That's more my hope. Right now, the reality is 30, 30, 40.
Yeah, okay. I do remember seeing lots of different sort of charts and things, which shows this sort of mystery sort of 30, 40% at the end, which is, this is going to be fixed with technology. It seems to be a bit of a black hole at the moment. We do have a session on that tomorrow, actually, I think, to sort of talk about what's the sort of the levers that we need to be pulling to try and get us best positioned to sort of address that black hole there. I'm going to have an early shout out actually for questions in the audience to see if we've got any questions in the audience for Sumit. Don't be shy. I will come back to you, have a think about it if you have any questions. No. So you talked about, and I will come back to you, but you mentioned earlier that we get a lot of variation from industry to industry. And Asia is a different market. We have some unique sort of challenges and opportunities here as well. What are the industries that sort of most excite you in Asia in terms of decarbonisation and where potentially we can help share these learnings with the rest of the world? What excites you here in the region?
Oh, so there's a lot of exciting stuff. I would say, across different industries, actually, there are different stages of maturity, and within each industry as well, there are players which range, to front runners, to laggards, and people who are still on the fence. In terms of, if I look at decarbonization and how things have progressed, I think the entire power sector has been the one which has been leading, from the front. So transition to renewables, getting to the entire bucket of solar, wind, power coming in. I think, whether it's countries, companies, they've all set goals, to get to 30, 40, 50% targets, not by 2050 or 2040, but by actually 2030. So this is one sector which is seeing a lot of investment, lot of action, actual transition happening on ground as well. The second is the entire automotive sector, where again, I think in pockets we've seen the EV revolution happen. So, China, of course, leads EVs from the front in terms of the adoption of electric vehicles across the board. Even in other markets, what we are seeing is there are certain segments of population that are shifting to electric vehicles because it also makes economic sense for them, like this entire taxi segment, because just the number of run hours, run kilometers are much more, and the cost economic setup.
I mean, just on that, we see the EV manufacturers doing a really good job bringing the cost down. BYD is sort of now the biggest sort of globally, bringing the cost of EVs down, and really sort of, democratizing access to it as well. But is the ecosystem sort of keeping shape with it here, sort of across the region? I mean, the charging ecosystem, although that's got a little bit easier, I think, with the sort of the 5-minute rapid charge for BYDs, which
Yeah,
I sort of come up with. But so is everybody playing their part to try and sort of come along the road for decarbonisation?
I would say the ecosystem is developing. So,
Yeah.
whether it was first the battery manufacturers, then, the battery component players, then now there are investments coming on the charging infra as well. Of course, it's an industry which is, again, very dynamic, as you said, from 12 hours to 6 hours to 1 hour, now 5 minutes, we are hearing all sorts of combinations which are possible. People are also experimenting with charging versus swapping as technology. So, again, there is evolution happening there. So there's a lot at play. So that's the nature. That's where, innovation comes in. That's the dynamic nature of the industry, which, truly fosters innovation, which is something which is truly interesting. And then, of course, if I move to the other segment, we are also seeing a lot of investments come from some of the heavy emitters as well, especially a lot of steel, cement, chemical players where the emissions per ton are absolutely quite large. And there again, given the numbers are so large, that's where actively we are seeing a lot of large players actually doing active investment. And again, there's a 2050 target, but there's also a 2030 target. There's also a 2027 target, which is good to see that people are now breaking this up and not seeing this as a pipe dream of future, but actually action happening on ground.
Are those big emitters, are they still focused on the sort of the phase one, the early easy wins type of things, or they moved into sort of the middle bucket yet?
I think it's a mix. Again,
Okay.
wide disparity across players. Most of them have understood the first bucket, and they are investing, whether it's in renewable power, whether it's in use of alternate fuel, whether it's in terms of electrification of, some of the earlier fuel, equipments that they had. So that's, of course, quite economically beneficial. But now they are also getting into the second bucket as well and trying and seeing where do some of the large investments play out. Like I can give examples of a lot of steel players are experimenting with hydrogen technology to try and see whether that can actually bring down emissions substantially. Of course, these are more experiments which are happening, but it's good to see that from the drawing board, they have now turned into pilots that are now in the plant. So hopefully, as time passes by, they move from POC, proof of concepts, to actual technologies which can be implemented at a much large scale as well.
Excellent, exciting. Fantastic. We do have a question just over here. If we get a microphone through just to the front row, please do let us know who you are, your affiliation, and keep the question short, please.
Mushtaq Memon from United Nations Environment Program. My question is the industry at the same page or same understanding with the words like decarbonization, carbon neutral, net zero, or there still needs some support to understand all these terms?
Oh, fantastic question. I think, many of my clients, sir, get confused on that. My answer typically is don't worry about, which term you are focused on. Let's get the work done and get the carbon down, whether you get to carbon neutral, net zero, or, the entire journey of decarbonization. But I think these are a few terms which have got much more clearer over a period of time, and thanks to the work of organizations like yours, where this has got consistently done. But I think the good part is that using these terminologies, using these definitions, the conversations are now moved from what does this mean to what can I do to get there, which is, I think, really fantastic to see. And of course, with continued work, I think more clarity will come in terms of net zero versus carbon neutral in minds of a lot of people. But I think we are slightly far from that stage right now. It's more around let's decarbonize, let's reduce 20, 30, 40%, and then we'll think about the others. That's where, at least in my mind, the industry is. But it's at a better place than where we were, say, 3 years back.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, particularly when you think about sort of SMEs and things like that, and whether they sort of really have a good understanding of all the definitions and what we're doing. But rather, you're saying let's just focus on actions and not really worry about sort of how we're going to define this stuff.
So a lot of SMEs actually, so they are typically suppliers to large corporations.
Yes.
So what we've seen is essentially, the focus on scope 3, what we call as, the upstream, downstream. The upstream part is more where the suppliers are involved. That's actually increased substantially. So again, these are terms, which again across geographies also, have a different connotation. So it's important to simplify those definitions, which is where what I have seen certain I'll give you an example of one of the organizations. They've simply said that, this is where you are, this is where you need to be. Don't worry about carbon
Right.
neutral, net zero, etc. This is my target for you if you want to be my supplier for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
So do this, come back, otherwise thank you. So
Okay.
I think I feel that's the simplest way of putting it, which can lead to a large scale understanding.
Yeah. Okay. I like that, simplifying, as long as they've got the tools to be able to sort of meet that and deliver on it. I think that's probably a good thing. I know there were a few more questions, but we are unfortunately out of time, and you probably all know that we're running late anyway. I'm sure Sumit won't mind if you sort of doorstep in when we get off stage or through networking drinks or something like that, if you've got some more questions.
No, absolutely. I am outside. I'm here the full day across a few sessions. So happy to catch up. Of course, also happy to catch offline through LinkedIn, etc. as well.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, I'm sort of, I guess, a little bit encouraged that sort of decarbonisation hasn't sort of fallen off the radar. It's still on the list. I think it's not near the top. It probably should be near the top, but it's been pushed down a little bit. But there's still some good stuff to happen, and we're moving forward in the right direction. So,
no, absolutely. And one of the things, maybe I know we are out of time, but I would add is one of my colleagues will be talking about some new green business opportunities tomorrow. So as the last 40% happens of decarbonization, that's giving rise to a lot of green business opportunities as well. So somewhere everything is interlinked, and
Yeah.
it's great to see there is action happening.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Thank you again, and thank you again to BCG for sponsoring this event and a lot of our events around the world. Really interesting. If you do want to connect with our speakers, with other people in the room, do use the swap card function as well. Get on there, share contacts and information. Big part of what we're doing here is networking and sharing information as well. It's not just sort of listening to us on the stage. So do get involved in that if you can. Thank you very much to you. Do all stick around for our next session, which is a panel discussion, which is titled Getting on Board, the Evolving Role of the CSO. This is going to be an interesting one because, I mean, the CSO role has changed so much,
Yeah.
I think, over a period of time. So much more on their plate. So looking forward to that one. And that one's going to be led by my colleague, Ritu Bandari, who's the manager and leading our sustainability practice here for Economist Impact. So I'll pass you over to Ritu, and thank you very much for your time.